Got a lot to talk about this morning in just about, well, our 2 hour show, can I put it this way, actually only has about 77 minutes of actual talk time. So, a little later in the program, we're going to be telling you about efforts from the American left to completely eradicate Christianity and replace it with other religious faiths, including their own, which is secularism, or worse, something coming from the nether reaches. Also, we've got a couple of thoughts that we'll share with you on some environmental issues if we get a chance later in the program. Lefty very upset with the current direction of the federal government on those counts. Lefty, on the other hand, maybe not representing all of the old miners that it used to, who are obviously wholly on board, and that's why they gave the current occupant of the White House the job. And they were the deciding factor. I think we're all aware of that. We can go over that history ad nauseum, but we've been there before. Steve Millington will also join us just after 8:30 this morning. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. We're down to the last couple of weeks with state legislative issues, maybe not even that, maybe just a matter of days before we bring that to an end. And Steve's going to be talking about some of the things that are currently going on in Boise. One of those that I read about this morning, we probably won't get to it today. We do expect that Congressman Raul Labrador will join us tomorrow morning on the show. That's always dependent on whether he gets called into committee or he gets waylaid by a gaggle of reporters while he's trying to get from one part of the Capitol building to another to join us on the radio. If we are joined by him tomorrow, we'll talk about Ryan Care and some of the issues that have come up with all of that. He's obviously opposed, and he'll have a lot to say if he joins us. There was a time when it was believed that Labrador would be going to work in President Trump's cabinet, and instead they picked for Department of Interior Ryan Zinke from neighboring Montana, who is a friend of Congressman Labrador's as well as an ally. But remember, at the time there was some discussion: how would you then fill the congressman's seat if he packed up and left? So they're talking in Boise right now about coming up with some sort of ability to have a special election or even a special primary, then a special election, if indeed somebody, because we've been dealing with this for decades and nobody really has a solid answer as to how you go about doing this. Steve may have some thoughts on that. On the good news front in Idaho is this story that came out of the Spokesman Review, which is not in Idaho, it's in Washington State, although relatively close. I think a lot of people who live in eastern Washington don't want anything to do with Olympia or Seattle or Tacoma. They'd prefer to be living in Idaho. And maybe the day will still yet come when they'll have self determination and they can do that. The headline is this: Idaho boasts top job growth rate in 2016. Idaho saw 4% job growth last year, giving it the fastest rate in the nation, the Idaho Department of Labor said Monday. The state added 27,500 jobs between January 2016 and January 2017. The issue with this, of course, is what type of jobs they happen to be. I remember the first time I ever met Maxine Bell, state representative from Jerome. She was in the studio having a conversation with me about job creation, and she said, "We do have a lot of new jobs." She said, "The problem is they're not paying very well." So our concentration needs to be a focus on higher end employment where people can actually make enough money they can consider saving for retirement. And some of the other expenses that they have in life can be covered. But we may well be on the road to recovery as far as that goes. At least a job that pays $10 an hour is a good start. Even if it doesn't pay $30 an hour, it's a good start. It gets us there. The writer says construction led the way with 4,500 new jobs. That was up more than 10%, actually more than 11%. Financial activities were next with 2,000 new jobs, up 6%. The construction activity doesn't surprise me. First of all, even in Twin Falls, you can see a lot of that going on. If you're on the north end of town, something is always changing there. Something is always, the building is going up. There's a new mini golf that's going up on Canyon Crest Drive. It's on our website. You can take a look at some of the details. I drove by it over the weekend coming home from church and was caught my attention right away. I like to play mini golf. Boise had the strongest job growth for the year with 14,400 more jobs, an increase of 4.8%. Now that makes sense because there's a tremendous building boom going on in downtown Boise. Some of that being led by one of oh the 475 candidates now announced for the Republican nomination for governor in Idaho. Tommy Alquist, doctor, medical doctor, as well as developer, he's responsible for a lot of that building that's going on in downtown Boise. I think there's actually just at the moment one, two, three announced candidates, maybe four, five might be where we top out. That's still a lot of Republicans who'd like to be the next governor, as Governor Butch Otter is not going to run for reelection next year. Just a quick reminder, he is conducting what they call it Capital for a Day. He's conducting one of those in Hanson this Friday. I think it's 9 until 3. I say I think it's 9 until 3 because I don't have it tattooed on my hands here. I used to work with a woman at a radio station years ago. Very classy lady. She was married to the son of a former Republican National Committee chair. Intelligent and just smart as a whip. But she would go out to various events in various places, and she happened to be a little absent-minded. She would forget to take along a notepad. So she showed up one day. I was going on the air, and she said, "Hey, I've got some new details on a big story." And I said, "All right, pull up a chair." We had a guest microphone. She pulled up a chair next to the guest microphone, and I started asking her questions live on air about it. And she started pulling up her hands, and she'd written her notes all over her hands. She was she was giving me details of what happened by reading her hands. Well, it's a little bit like going to see somebody about what do they call it, palm reading? But this was real. I mean, it's not phony like that. Bill Colley with you. Now, somebody's going to call and say, "I'm a palm reader and you're hurting my business and you hurt my feelings and I am deeply offended." Then you're a liberal. If anybody is offended out there, then you're a snowflake. Go down to the local college. They'll have a room for you with coloring books and puppies, and you can have a good cry in there too as well. But I don't think anybody out there realistically, most people, it might be fun to go have somebody look at your palm. "Gee, you got a lot of calluses here. I see in my mind that you work hard for a living." Yes, gee, I wonder how you figured that one out. A couple of other quick notes on some issues around the state of Idaho. I have a guest opinion appearing in the Idaho Statesman out of Boise today. And the writer is all for bringing a mission of F-35s to the state of Idaho, but says they don't want them anywhere near the city of Boise. In other words, not in my backyard. So the writer is proposing out in Owyhee County so they can be closer to us and they can overfly your home instead, because the liberals in Boise wouldn't want them there. The writer says it is time for Idaho to take a page from the Navy's playbook, and he's referencing a military base that was built in the 1950s in California. Before there were really a lot of people living in California, we should point out. The numbers were obviously growing in the 1950s and through the 1960s, but you still had a lot of open space, and the Navy ended up buying some property out in the middle of nowhere, which is no longer in the middle of nowhere, we should point out. Well, what happens is the Navy built this base in the 1950s on 30,000 acres. And at the time, the Navy had the neighborhood all to itself. Over time, a lot of liberals moved into the neighborhood, built new houses, and then demanded sound barriers because apparently they never saw the Navy aviators flying over while they were looking at the property. It's like people who go out into farmland, and you'll drive by a herd of cattle, and then you'll see a piece of property, and you'll say to the agent, "Yeah, I'll take it." You build your house, and then you get your house built, and then you say, "Somebody needs to do something about the smell of the poop. I'm going down to the town board and demand that they do things for me, and that they acknowledge liberalism as a self-evident truth." Well, excuse me, but when you passed the cattle driving out to the new property, you did get an idea that perhaps there might be a little bit of an aroma. That's the smell of money, we should point out. So people will move in next door to an airport or an airbase, and then they'll start complaining, "It's awfully noisy here." The fact that while you were actually looking at the property and there were 8 or 9 sorties that went over while you were there never seems to have caused any alarm. But after you buy the property, then somebody else needs to pay for the sound barriers to be put up in your neighborhood, other taxpayers, that is, so that you can enjoy sitting out in your backyard. I can remember being a young reporter. I had to go interview a woman. I used to work in a city near what was called Hancock Field, which had been a major base in World War II and then became an air guard base. And I went to interview this woman, and she was working on she was crocheting, and she was sitting outside on a beautiful day, crocheting in a lawn chair. And I was doing an interview with her about some of the noise in the neighborhood from the F-16s, which would fly by. And she's calmly sitting there and she continues to crochet and she says, "Now, these are the worst." And then all of a sudden you hear this roar coming up. And then it goes over the top of us. And she pauses while the roar goes by and it finally passes. And she says, "See what I mean? I won an award for the best use of sound for that story that particular year, for obvious reasons." So this guy says, if you're going to have an F-35 mission in Idaho, you got to do it somewhere where it won't bother him. And the liberals in Boise don't want it, but they know that there's a lot of God-fearing conservatives out in Hawaii County. Well, okay, there aren't many, but if you're in Hawaii County, you're not going to find many devilish liberals. So, in other words, the handful of people who live out there, you should take it, just like you should take the giant whirligigs, the giant pinwheels, the wind power, the turbines that turn and turn and turn out there, which we are finding are causing more and more health problems. If you're a wealthy Kennedy, you don't want them anywhere near your home in Massachusetts. But if you put them out in the Midwest or out here in the desert, then that's fine. Bother the people out there in flyover country. They voted for Trump. They deserve it. 817. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And one other note from around the state of Idaho today. Remember the guy last week who said that I had to stop talking about how Illinois is spending itself into oblivion, even though I was pointing out they're going to come and ask people in Idaho to bail them out? And he said, you need to talk more about Idaho. All right. I was going to mention the moose I saw, but I was in Wyoming when that actually happened a few months back. And then I was going to talk about watching the waterfalls the other day. They're still there. Nothing's changed. They were there a week ago and they were there a month ago. But I do have this. This comes from KBOI. A 19-year-old Kuna man was caught taking photos of a woman in a bathroom stall at a Meridian store, deputies said Monday. By the time they caught up with him, he was still trying to delete the photographs from his cell phone. I think this kid, though, he's got a really good defense. He's going to tell them that as he was in the store, he suddenly that day felt like he was a woman and had to use the ladies' room. And therefore, on the advice of Barack Hussein Obama, who used to be president, he had to go into the ladies' room. And all he was trying to do, he was so stunned by the fact that it didn't have any urinals, he was taking some photographs to show all of his friends. So there will be a clever lawyer out there, and he is going to come up with that argument and make it in court. You know that that's on the way. And his client is just a victim. Quick note. We have tomorrow morning in the studio one of the medical professionals from Tripp Family Medicine with us between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. It's your opportunity to get a healthcare question answered while one of the medical pros happens to be here. We do it every Wednesday. It's called Better Health, as I pointed out. Life's too short not to feel good is the motto of Tripp Family Medicine. The office is still looking for new patients. Located on Fillmore Street in Twin Falls, directly across from the main post office. And we like to point out, too, the doctor can often see you on the very same day if you've got an issue, if you call early in the morning. We say often. Often doesn't mean always, but often. 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. It's 41. We've got more coming up in just a couple of minutes. As I mentioned, Steve Millington will be joining us in studio. Also coming up in the next hour, we're going to be talking about Christianity on trial, thanks to your friendly neighborhood liberals. Just a quick note for those listening this morning, if you're having some difficulty hearing our program, I highly recommend, of course, that first of all, you could go online and listen there if you're having difficulty as you're driving out of the area, perhaps. But it could well be that your ears need to be checked. That is hearing health. And I have been reminding people we have an opportunity with somebody who works on the local level. She's in Rupert, Dr. Christine Pickup at Mount Harrison Audiology. And a lot of people are asking, look, I've got a lot of friends out there who tell me about people who can work with me on hearing issues in my own backyard, practically. Why would I go all the way out to Rupert? Well, if you live in Rupert, you're not going all the way out there. Let's be honest about that. If you live there, she's right around the corner. On the other hand, why would you choose Mount Harrison Audiology? Let's say if you're living, I don't know, in Murtaugh or somewhere. Well, experience. Dr. Pickup is a certified audiologist, 17 years serving the hearing impaired of all ages. True diagnostic testing is going to help you know what the causes of your hearing loss are and will lead to the best treatment options. Trust your hearing to a certified audiologist. Call Mount Harrison Audiology for your appointment today. Telephone number 208-312-0957. Now, I'm off to the eye doctor after the show today. But I did find somebody a little bit closer. After 2 years of the same pair of glasses, I'm going to get yelled at because you're supposed to change them out every year. And the fact is, I can no longer spell, which tells me that there's an issue with the prescription. Steve Millington joining us in studio today. Welcome back.
Good morning. How are you?
You had a great argument during the break about putting the F-35s at Mountain Home versus Gowan Field.
I didn't get all of your conversation this morning because I don't rush in until.
Somebody wrote me and said it's the sound of freedom, by the way.
And actually, many of you may recall that I have a grandson at the Air Force Academy, and once a year they have Parents Weekend over there, and you can go over and when those F-35s come and they're at that facility, they don't have air restrictions.
Well, I trust the writer. Russell Smith used to be a close friend of a former defense secretary by the name of Donald Rumsfeld, who was also a pilot, aviator in the Navy.
Well,
and he says, sound of freedom.
Those 35s, when they come across that parade field and across the football field, you could almost throw rocks at them.
You've seen them down at the Air Force Academy.
Whoa, they are right in your face, and the ground shakes and the stadium shakes, and I just say, yeah, bring them on, man, bring them on. But my argument about Gowan Field versus Mountain Home Air Force Base, Gowan Field is the largest commercial airport facility in the state of Idaho, and it's only going to get bigger. Of necessity, it's going to get bigger. They're getting more and more direct flights to points west and points east, and so they're going to have to grow. And as they grow, eventually there's not any more space. There's no vacant ground around Gowan Field. They're going to push the military side of that off of the Gowan Field. So let's just put the F-35s down to Mountain Home to begin with, and get them stable down there, and they can get acclimated. And if you've been down to, don't go to Mountain Home, go out to the air base. It's 10 miles out of town, and it's when they build it, the county there was very careful. There are lots of restrictions as far as.
And we're talking Elmore County.
We're talking Elmore County. They got all kinds of restrictions around the base where you can't have.
It's very close, though, to Owyhee County as well.
It's
gray
just
area
there's
the base.
4 or 5 miles, and you drop down into the canyon or into the Snake River, and there's Owyhee County over there. But they're noisy. There's no question. But we're going to have less interruption at Mountain Home Air Force Base than we are at Gowan Field in Boise. And I look at it and I say to myself, when I was a kid in high school, I wanted to be a pilot. But my eyesight was not very good, and contact lenses were not very popular, and my glasses were as thick as Coke bottles. Now, only old people are going to remember what that's like. And so I had to give it up. But even today, yesterday morning, I was outside kind of checking the countryside, walking around the place, and there was a contrail going across the sky of a jet, and I just stood absolutely still and watched that thing go across the sky, and I thought, oh, man, I would love that.
And I was telling the story about living near the Hancock Field, which is an old World War II era base and now an Air Guard base, and doing an interview and how noisy. And I actually lived in that neighborhood briefly. I had a basement apartment, and I had rabbit ears on the TV set, and every time a jet would go over, the picture would squiggle.
Fuzzy,
I remember that very well, even though it was a little quieter in the basement. And then years ago, a friend who had served with the Thunderbirds took me to a Thunderbird show. And while we were on the beach watching the show, they brought in a Harrier jet, and it stopped right in front of us. You want to talk about noisy.
Yeah.
That is, and I tried to get some pictures and video of that. You can't even hear me talking because of the noise. And we were probably only 175 feet from that particular spot.
Well, the one advantage to going someplace like the Air Force Academy to watch those F-35s, there's no one there going to object to an F-35 coming right over the top of your head. They're all in favor of it. And but man, they're noisy, and they are something to watch.
Either way,
brother,
whether it be Gowan Field or Mountain Home, it's going to be good for the Idaho economy.
Absolutely. And if the Air Force people will tell you that they're going to phase out of 15s and go to 35s, and the next generation behind that is going to be the F-22s. And so now I'm not a big aficionado of aircraft. That's just what I've read and heard and so forth. So let's get the 35s to Idaho. There's very few places out in the West where they can put a squadron of those things, an entire wing, if you will, of Air Force personnel to handle the F-35s. Let's not shoot ourselves in the foot. That'll be a great boon for the Mountain Home Air Force Base and for the city of Mountain Home, for Idaho in general. And if you want an interesting little observation, drive over to Simcoe Road exit, which is just north. No, just west. I'm sorry, just west, northwest of Mountain Home. Be there at 7 o'clock in the morning and sit there on the exit and watch the traffic coming from Boise to Mountain Home.
We were just talking too as well. If you're going to be in Mountain Home, it's always an excuse to go to AJ's. So.
Exactly. they have a pretty good breakfast menu there.
They do. It's coming up on 8:30. We've got more with
That was
Steve
free
Millington.
advertising for AJ's, by the way.
Yeah, I'm going to hear from the advertising department.
Oh, boy. Yeah, they're going to beat us both on the head on that one.
Coming up at 8:30, Steve Millington. More with Steve coming up. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party in just a few minutes. Bill Colley with you as well on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We're looking at some very warm weather for the remainder of the week, other than Thursday, I guess, when we get a little rain. But even then, it's going to be more seasonable. On the other hand, still cool at night. If you're having problem heating your home, you need to call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric in Burley. They'll come out. They'll get the job done right. They'll get it done right the first time. Problem-free, cozy winters are found at Ramsey Heating and Electric, 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. The telephone number, 678-0459, 678-0459. Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. We're at 41